Hey there, this is Jane from the blog chalkingupsuccess.com. Today I'm in the garden, as you can see, and I'm always looking for ways to save water in our garden, and super thirsty annual containers like this are a bit of a no-go for me. So after a bit of thought and mooching about in our garden, I came up with 2 money-saving and eco-friendly tips for saving water and earth in large annual containers like this one. Today I'm going to show you how I use those tricks to pot up these annual containers so that they provide us with prolific blooms right the way through the summer, and if we're lucky with the weather, right through to the end of autumn too. So let's get on with it. This year I wanted to plant 4 deep annual containers along the length of our deck, but the containers are pretty deep and they would take up a large amount of plant in earth. So as summer annuals don't really need a deep container full of earth, I went about finding some organic filling material for my flower containers, which I could add to the bottom of the pots and to save a bit of money on potting soil. For my first container, I decided to use some leftover Ceramis planting granules which I found in our basement. Instead of adding the granules to the soil, I decided to use it to fill the bottom of some of my pots, and that would give some really good drainage. Because the granules are porous, they will store lots of water as well, which will be available for my bedding plants to take up from the roots. The soil I'm using here is peat free, and that's really important. Peat is mined from peat bogs, which are hundreds of years old, and they're amongst the rarest of all natural habitats that we have on earth. Because of intense mining to provide cheap garden compost, the peat bogs are being destroyed, and they're now classed as endangered natural habitats, which also harms our climate and promotes global warming. If the potting compost you buy for your annual containers is cheap, then the chances are pretty strong that you're buying compost containing peat. So that's why by using fillers for the bottom of my pots, I can spend my money where it counts. Peat-free potting compost may be a little bit more expensive to buy, but it's usually packed full of nutrients that will help feed your plants all summer long. If you've ever filled annual containers before, you'll know what a pain it is to plant the flowers after the potting earth has been added. You're usually scraping away the earth to add the root ball and then trying to squish more earth between the plants to fill the gaps. And meanwhile, the trailing plants are getting in the way and you can't see a thing. So my potting hack for annual containers makes life much easier, and here's how I do it. Decide how high you want the plants to sit in the container, leaving enough room around the rim for watering. Last winter was so mild that some of the trailing plants I had in these annual containers last year had started to grow again, and I've separated those plants out, and I'm going to use them again to fill out the new annual containers, which you'll see a little bit later on. Usually the winters here are extremely cold and we get snow for months on end, so it would never have been possible to recycle bedding plants from one year to the next without a heated greenhouse. And I think it's a sure sign of global warming that we were able to do that this year. Then remove the plants from the pots and just put them to one side. It's important to make sure the plants are properly watered before planting, and the best way to do this is to immerse the whole pot into a bucket of water, and then you just hold the root ball under the water until all the air bubbles have stopped rising to the surface. Then, once you've immersed all your summer annuals, you're ready for my next planting hack. Then add some slow release summer bedding fertilizer to the earth, and just follow the instructions on the box as to how much you need. And then Gently mix the fertilizer into the top layer of earth with your hands. And place the empty pots back into the planting containers. And then fill up the spaces around and in between the empty pots with potting earth. Then take the empty pots away, and you've got your holes ready for your plants to go in. So just add your plants, without the pots obviously, to the spaces that are left by the pots. Some of your plants might already be root bound. You can tell this by looking at the root ball. If the roots are packed tightly and starting to grow in a circle, or have formed mats on the bottom of the pot where you have to break them off, to get the plant out, then they are root bound. And to give the plant a better chance of taking root in your new pot and taking up nutrients as soon as possible, pull at the roots a little with your fingers and break them up. And this will encourage the roots to start growing down and out again into the fresh earth and the fertilizer. One of the plants I've added to my annual containers this year is a pretty climbing nasturtium. When I picked this up from the garden centre, it was already attached to a small climbing frame, but knowing how fast nasturtiums grow, I know I'm going to have to make larger supports if I want to encourage the plant to grow vertically. So for the climbing frame, I'm just going to insert 4 large branches into the container, so 1 in each corner, and I'll tie them together at the top with some string. Remember what I told you about the trailing plants that managed to survive the winter outside in the flower basket? Well, now I'm going to plant those into the spaces at the back of the container. The plants look healthy and strong, and I'm hoping that they're going to take root eventually and fill out this gap at the back of the pot. Next, I'm just adding some wreaths over the top of the branches so that the nasturtiums will have a place to rest as they're climbing up the frame. So these wreaths are made from wild clematis vines, and I've twisted them into a circle and tucked the end in to stop it unraveling. And the filler for my second batch of annual containers is my favourite, and it's a tip I picked up from Monty Don of the BBC's Gardener's World. After summer was over last year, instead of throwing away the summer annuals or composting the earth and the flowers that were in my balcony containers, I left them to one side in the garden all over the winter. And now I'm going to empty the containers and use that earth to fill out the bottom of my deep annual containers. Anyway, if you want to use this method, you have to remember to turn the old compost over before placing it in the bottom of the new annual containers. Even though I've immersed the summer annuals in water, I still need to give the containers a good watering to stop the dry soil from pulling the water away from the plants. I'm also going to insert a glass water reservoir into each pot, and then I won't water these containers again for a couple of days. After that, depending on the weather, I'll check these annual containers every day to see if they need water, and I'll fill up the water reservoir as and when needed. So there you have it. That's my 2 money saving tricks for how to save earth and water in your annual containers. I hope you like them and you can use these tricks to pot up your own bedding plants. That's it from me at Chalking Up Success this week, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you know of any other organic methods of filling deep annual containers like these, then let me know in the comments below.